It wasn't just a horror film. It was a transformation not just on screen, but behind it. An American Werewolf in London, 1981, didn't just snarl at the moon. It rewrote the rules of what horror could look like, sound like, and feel like. It arrived in theaters like a fever dream, violent, funny, and cruel in ways the audience wasn't ready for. And the monster at its center? That wasn't the scariest part. Underneath the werewolf's fur was a tangle of real fear of alienation, of identity unraveling, of a director at war with his own vision, and of a makeup transformation so painful and revolutionary that it won the first ever Oscar in its category and nearly destroyed a friendship. There were fights that broke out behind closed doors, scenes that were shot but never shown, a script that was too dark for the 70 seconds and nearly lost forever. And buried beneath the dry British humor and gory practical effects was something no one expected, a profound sense of tragedy, like the last breath of a man who knows he's not coming back. This isn't just a story about silver bullets and full moons. It's about obsession, about betrayal, about the curse of making something so good it haunts you. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about. An American Werewolf in London. Fact 1. The script that nobody wanted until it was too late. Before it became a cult horror landmark, An American Werewolf in London was just a stack of pages collecting dust. John Landis wrote the script in 1969, when he was only 19 years old. No one wanted it. Studios found it too scary to be funny, and too funny to be scary. Landis kept it close for over a decade, shopping it around while directing comedies like Animal House and The Blues Brothers. Ironically, it was the success of those films that finally gave him the clout to make his monster movie. But by then, the industry had changed, and so had Landis. He no longer wanted to direct a standard horror. He wanted something that would violate tone, flip expectations, and make people uncomfortable. His werewolf would be both tragic and grotesque. The comedy would punch you in the gut, and the horror would laugh in your face. And so, the project no one wanted became the film no one could forget. The script aged, twisted, and festered, just like the creature it created. Fact 2. The transformation that made people vomit. Literally, what happens when a werewolf transformation isn't hidden in shadows but shoved under bright lights, unflinching and slow? Rick Baker, the legendary special effects artist, answered that question with a sequence so visceral, so biological, that audiences reportedly fainted or threw up in test screenings. Using inflatable bladders, stretchable latex, and real-time animatronics, Baker and his team designed a transformation that didn't cut away a first in horror cinema. Every tendon twist, every bone snap, every painful elongation was shown in agonizing detail. David's scream wasn't just a performance. The actor, David Naughton, was actually enduring hours of torturous prosthetics. This scene would earn Rick Baker the first ever Academy Award for Best Makeup, but it came at a cost. It nearly ended his friendship with fellow artist Rob Bottin, who felt betrayed after being passed over for the job. The scene didn't just transform a man into a wolf, it transformed the horror genre forever. Fact 3. A Nazi werewolf nightmare that no one explained. In one of the film's most bizarre and controversial sequences, David dreams of his family being slaughtered by Nazi werewolves, grotesque monsters in full SS uniform, burning his home to the ground. The scene comes out of nowhere, no build-up, no context, just pure cinematic terror. Audiences were stunned not just by the violence, but by the surrealism. Was it a metaphor for trauma? A jab at Hollywood's exploitation of violence? Or just Landis indulging in shock for shock's sake? To this day, the director has refused to give a clear explanation. He simply calls it a nightmare within a nightmare. Critics called it tasteless. Others called it genius. But no one could ignore it. In a film about a man turning into a beast, this was the moment that reminded us. The real horror isn't always supernatural. Sometimes, it wears a uniform and smiles as it kills. Fact 6. The soundtrack that lied to your face. Every song in the film that plays during a key transformation or violent scene is about the moon, and every one of them is upbeat. From Bobby Vinton's Blue Moon to Van Morrison's Moondance, the film leans into ironic contrast. But that was no accident. Landis meticulously curated the soundtrack to create dissonance, a cheery veneer over horror. He wanted the audience to laugh, then immediately regret it, to smile, and then squirm. One track was almost used but later scrapped, Cat Stevens' Moonshadow. Stevens, having recently converted to Islam, refused to let his music be in a film about the supernatural. The decision only deepened the film's cult appeal. The result? A horror film that weaponized irony and made you sing along with your own discomfort. Fact 7. The London location that tried to ban the film, Piccadilly Circus, one of the most iconic and busiest areas in London, was the site of the film's explosive climax. But getting permission to shoot there was nearly impossible. British authorities were notoriously strict about filming in that district, especially for a horror movie that involved a werewolf rampaging through traffic. John Landis had to go through months of negotiation, even promising to adhere to a strict time window, shooting from midnight to 4 a.m. with only minimal disruptions. To gain access, he arranged a special private screening of his previous film, The Blues Brothers, for the city council, and it worked. Still, the scene had to be shot fast, with real buses and cars crashing in carefully choreographed sequences. What you see on screen was done with little room for error. London didn't want this film, and that tension bleeds into every second of the final chase. Fact 8. The star who lied about his body and regretted it. David Naughton, cast as the doomed protagonist, was an unknown actor with a background in TV commercials, notably the Dr. Pepper campaign. During auditions, he claimed he had no problem with nudity. Landis needed full frontal shots for the transformation and running scenes, and Naughton gave a confident yes. But once on set, things changed. The cold London air, the long hours, and the vulnerability of being naked in public locations, including a real zoo, began to wear him down. It was humiliating, he later admitted. Still, the scenes were shot, brutally, uncomfortably, and without body doubles. Naughton's commitment became part of the film's rawness, but behind the camera, it left scars that lasted longer than the makeup glue. Fact 9. The hidden cameo that took 40 years to spot. One of the most overlooked appearances in the film isn't a monster or a victim, it's Frank Oz, the voice of Miss Piggy and Yoda. He appears in two roles. First, as Mr. Collins from the American Embassy, and again, though few realized, as the voice of the angry man in the hospital. Why? Because Landis and Oz had worked together on The Blues Brothers, and Landis thought it would be funny to slip him in. It's subtle and totally uncredited, but Oz's voice is so distinct, fans who re-watched the film decades later were stunned. It's one of those details that doesn't change the story, but once you know it's there, you can't unhear it. Fact 10. The dream sequence that almost got the film an X rating, the infamous hospital bed transformation where David dreams of opening his eyes and seeing himself as a decaying corpse in a forest, pushed the envelope. But that wasn't the only scene under scrutiny. The MPAA almost gave the film an X rating because of its relentless mixture of gore and sex. Particularly, the love scene between David and Alex was flagged, not because of what was shown, but because of what it suggested: emotional intimacy right before physical monstrosity. Landis refused to trim it, arguing that the contrast was the whole point. Eventually, he won, but barely. What's fascinating is that some of the goriest moments, throats ripped open, limbs torn apart, went unchallenged. It was the emotional juxtaposition, not the blood, that censors couldn't handle. Horror wasn't just in the violence, it was in the vulnerability. Fact 11. The real wolves that refused to cooperate. For a film titled An American Werewolf in London, it's surprisingly short on actual wolves. But there was one scene, David waking up naked in a wolf den at the London Zoo, that required real animals. The handlers brought in trained wolves, but they weren't exactly ready for Hollywood. The animals were restless, unpredictable, and refused to stay on their mark. David Naughton had to lie naked just feet away from them, with minimal protection. One wrong move, and things could have gone very, very wrong. Landis later joked that the wolves were the most expensive extras he ever hired, and the least cooperative. But the unease you see in that scene? Totally real. No acting required. Fact 12. The one scene that made the crew walk off set. There was one moment during production that proved too much. Not for audiences, but for the crew. It was a makeup test. A dummy head of Griffin Dunn's character, torn to shreds and grotesquely animated to simulate post-mortem dialogue. The head looked so realistic, bloated, bruised, lips half missing, that some crew members reportedly refused to be in the room while it was being tested. One technician walked off set and didn't return for the rest of the shoot that day. The scene made it into the film, toned down slightly. But the original prosthetic, stored in Rick Baker's workshop, remains one of the most disturbing artifacts in horror history. A face that talked long after death and made the living look away. Fact 13. The censored TV version that made no sense. When the film was prepared for late-night television in the 1,980 seconds, network censors butchered it. Nearly all of the violence was cut, the transformation, the attacks, the Nazi werewolf dream gone. But the real damage came when they trimmed the dialogue without adjusting the pacing. Entire conversations ended mid-sentence, scenes built toward horror, and then abruptly faded to black. In one case, the soundtrack kept playing while the screen was frozen on a character's face, making viewers think their TVs had malfunctioned. Landis disowned the version, calling it an embarrassment. But that censored cut became its own myth, whispered about by horror fans who taped it off TV and couldn't understand why nothing made sense. A version of the film that felt haunted not by werewolves, but by scissors. Fact 14. The movie that delayed a friendship by a decade. Rick Baker, the special effects genius behind the transformation scenes, had originally promised the project to John Landis years before it was greenlit, but when it stalled, he moved on and began working on The Howling, another werewolf film, with protege Rob Bottin. When An American Werewolf in London finally got funding, Landis demanded Baker return. That meant leaving The Howling midstream. Bottin was furious. The mentor he trusted had bailed to work on something better. The two didn't speak for nearly 10 years. Ironically, both films came out within months of each other, and both are now considered classics. But only one had an Oscar, and only one left a scar on a friendship. Fact 15. The poster that lied and became iconic. Anyway, the film's original US poster featured David and Jack walking through the misty moors with the tagline, "From the director of Animal House, a different kind of animal." But that image never happens in the movie. David and Jack are never seen standing together in that exact pose, and the lighting is completely fabricated. It was a marketing decision, meant to link the film to Landis's previous comedy hits while hinting at horror. Fans were confused. Was this a spoof? A satire? A serious film? The poster told them nothing and everything. Over time, it became part of the legend, a misleading relic of a film that defied definition, a lie that, somehow, felt true. Fact 16. The day a tourist walked onto set and thought it was real. During filming at the London Underground, the crew staged a gruesome scene involving a bloody corpse lying by the tracks. The lighting was minimal, the area closed off, and actors were rehearsing quietly when a confused tourist wandered onto set through an unlocked side door. The man reportedly screamed, thinking he'd stumbled upon a real murder. Security rushed in, and filming was paused for nearly an hour while the situation was explained. Landis found it hilarious. The tourist? Not so much. What's remarkable is that the scene was never intended to be that realistic. It was just another night of shooting. But the mix of raw lighting, silence, and tension created a nightmare that blurred fiction and reality for at least one unlucky visitor. Fact 17. The scene that was cut because it was too funny. Landis originally shot a dream sequence where David imagines himself in a hospital bed surrounded by Muppets, not Nazi werewolves, but literal Muppets, singing him lullaby. It was meant to highlight the absurdity of his mental state, a surreal break in tone. But during test screenings, the audience laughed too hard, not chuckled full belly laughs, and that killed the momentum for the next scene, which was supposed to be horrifying. Landis cut it reluctantly, saying, "It worked too well for the wrong reasons." No known footage of the scene survives, and the script mentions it only vaguely, a lost moment of madness that might have made the film even stranger or broken it completely. Fact 18. The cemetery that wouldn't allow a werewolf. For the film's ending, Landis wanted to shoot in Highgate Cemetery, one of London's most iconic and atmospheric graveyards. But when the location managers explained that the climax involved a werewolf being shot to death in an alley near gravestones, the cemetery administrators flatly refused. "No monsters among the dead," they said. The team was forced to construct a fake cemetery wall on a soundstage to mimic the look of Highgate. Ironically, the refusal made the scene even more claustrophobic. Instead of wide Gothic vistas, we got tight shots, shadows, and a death scene without dignity. And that, in the end, suited the film better. Fact 19. The man in the suit who never got credit. While Rick Baker's transformation effects earned the spotlight, many forget that a real person wore the full-body werewolf suit for key shots. His name was Harry Fielder, a British actor and stuntman who specialized in background roles. In this film, he played one of the most iconic monsters in cinema and was never officially credited. Fielder had to endure hours inside a foam latex shell, crawling through cramped alleyways on all fours under hot lights. He couldn't see clearly, he couldn't breathe well, and yet his physicality sold the illusion. To this day, many fans think the werewolf was entirely animatronic, but part of its menace came from a man sweating in silence, unseen, unknown, but unforgettable. Fact 20. The joke that became a nightmare. Near the film's midpoint, David watches television in the hospital. On the screen, a bizarre, fake ad for "See You Next Wednesday," a fictional porno film created just for the movie. Landis inserted it as an inside joke, a running gag he'd used in multiple films before. But something about that fake ad unsettled viewers. The flat lighting, the robotic acting, the eerie silence between lines. It felt wrong, too clean, too sterile, almost like something from another reality. Some fans claim it's scarier than The Werewolf. Others think it's a commentary on how media numbs our response to violence and sex. Whatever the truth, this one-joke scene became one of the most dissected and disturbing parts of the movie. Bonus fact: the final scream was real and no one can agree why. The film ends not with a howl, but with a scream abrupt, human, and deeply unsettling. As David dies, there's a final vocalization that seems too raw to be acted. Some say it was David Naughton's real voice, recorded during an unused take. Others claim it was a post-production accident, a piece of sound from another scene layered in by mistake. Even John Landis has given contradictory explanations over the years. In one interview, he claimed it was an intentional blending of man and beast. In another, he admitted he didn't remember how the scream got there at all. That ambiguity has fueled endless fan theories. Was it David's final cry for help? A ghost trapped in the edit? Or simply a sound that got left in and became immortal by accident? Whatever the answer, that last sound lingers. You hear it once, and you never stop hearing it. Which fact did you find the most disturbing or the most surprising? Was it the transformation that changed horror forever? Or the final scream that no one can explain? Tell us in the comments what stayed with you and which film you think we should dissect next. And if you're not afraid of what's hiding behind the facts, to hit subscribe. We'll be waiting.